Sonic Lab
TV.
Doepfer have got to be one of the most prolific synthesizer manufacturers on the planet. Their Eurorack A100 module format currently has 100 modules available. Imagine that, if you had a system with just one of each of them, that would be monster. The latest system that they've just released is the Dark Energy. This is a fully analog, single voice, desktop unit. It breaks out of the constraints of the Eurorack format and lands chunkily on the desktop. It's a beautiful little thing. But it also has direct interfacing for the computer in the form of a USB interface and a MIDI in. So you can drive this directly from a MIDI keyboard or from your DAW. It also lets you access additional CV outputs as well as the gate to patch either back into it to control additional parameters, or you can use it to interface with your existing analog gear. In the box, as well as the unit itself, you get hard copy manual, power supply. This is the German one because it's an early version. Incidentally, the power supply is 15 volts. It's quite unusual and it seems to be pretty finicky as to what it wants to take. I tried plugging one of my universal power supplies into it and it didn't seem to like it very much. You also get a mini jack to 1/4 inch jack lead, which is great because the actual output of the unit is on 1/8 inch jack. You also get a couple of 1/8 inch jack patch leads, so you can patch up some more modular action. USB cable for connecting to the computer, and that's your lot. Let's have a look at the rear panel. You've got a USB connection for hooking up to the computer, a MIDI in for driving it just off a straight MIDI input. The control voltage and gate outputs come via these mini jack connectors here. Around the front panel, we've got additional control voltage inputs, VCO frequency, VCO pulse width, VCF frequency and VCA amplitude, gate, external audio processing, LFO1 output, envelope output and your main audio outputs. The Dark Energy voice architecture is deceptively simple. There's a single voltage control oscillator, 3-octave range with fine tune. Each of the waves has its own pulse width parameter, which is quite interesting. Two of the waves are more sawtooth derived. There's also this triangle which gives you a bit more beef. The VCF is a 24 dB low pass filter, resonant. When you set the particularly high resonance, you get this kind of quite unusual warbly sort of quite distorted sort of resonance, quite good. The filter is provided by the Curtis chip, which is incidentally the same as the Sequential Circuits 6-track. VCA with an initial level can be modulated via the LFO or the ADSR. ADSR is a standard attack decay sustain release with a range switch, so you can go from short snappy envelopes to long evolving ones. Two LFOs with medium, low and high ranges. They go quite a long way into the audio spectrum, very good for cross modulation. If I just start off with go right up high. Both the LFOs have triangle and square wave outputs. This extended range allows you to do all sorts of fancy cross modulation effects. Sonically, the Dark Energy isn't competing with something as beefy as, say, the Mini Moog, but it does do a pretty decent bass line. A nice evolving top line filter, and a fairly convincing 303 dirty emulation. The modulation and patching allows me to add some real character and grit to the sound. Listen here as I patch LFO1 into VCF frequency and modulate it at a really high frequency. I personally really like the pulse width modulation in this synth, particularly in the lower registers. It sounds very wide and fat and has a lot of movement. But don't forget you can modulate to a very high frequency a lot of the other parameters as well for some crazy stuff, including the VCO frequency, the pulse width. the VCF frequency and the amplitude. Anyway, let's have a look at the USB and MIDI CV side of it and see what this can do. To set the unit up, all you've got to do is either plug a USB cable in from your host computer and some compatible MIDI software such as Ableton Live or Logic or whatever, or a MIDI cable in. You press the Learn button, this light flashes, you press the lowest note on your keyboard and that takes the channel information and the relative octave position on the keyboard. Then it's just a matter of playing. There are a number of other user configurable options in the MIDI CV interface, and you access these by sending program changes while in Learn mode. This is a little bit complicated to set up, but it does give you access to things like note priority and assigning the controller value for MIDI CV4. There's also a little arpeggiator in there which can be clocked externally or internally. But to be honest, it is a little bit tricky to set up, and I would suspect most people will just stick with the system defaults. Probably the easiest way to consider the built-in CV interface on the Dark Energy is really that it's there just to control itself. With control voltage 1 hardwired to the voltage control oscillator and the trigger hardwired to the envelope, basically as soon as you plug a MIDI signal or a USB signal into here, you can play it like a normal synth. Additional control comes from the 3 other control voltages. Control voltage 2 takes its feed from the pitch bend, so you can wiggle the pitch bend and say if you patched it into the VCF, you would modulate the filter frequency. CV3 takes its signal from the note on velocity, so you can patch into the VCA or VCF to get velocity sensitivity out of the unit. Control voltage 4 takes its signal from any other assignable MIDI controller. It is possible to patch external equipment from the CV outputs of the Dark Energy, but not all synthesizers are compatible with the 1 volt per octave control voltage format that it outputs. Here's the MS-20. You can hear it's not actually getting what it needs. However, if you just want to modulate some specific parameters that aren't pitch or polarity specific, then it's pretty easy to set up. I've got the pitch bend here, controlling the low pass filter of the MS-20. So it's not a fully featured MIDI CV interface, only operates on 1 channel, and the interfacing for external gear is limited, but it's still available. I really like the Doepfer Dark Energy. I think it's a great little synth. I think for the price, which I think is €398, it's a great way of getting into the modular synth without having to get a whole rack, a power supply. You can get started straight away, and I have a feeling that Doepfer will be bringing out more compatible modules to expand the line.